Welcome to Short Scale Modelling. My next build is something different. It's this Tamiya's electric handy drill. Now, this is a very small RPM drill, which I've been debating whether to get one for a couple of years now, and it's been recommended to me yet again by another modeler. Everyone keeps on recommending it, to tell you the truth. And I'm going to be building the Enterprise E very soon. And like the D, there are many windows to drill out. Now on the D, I drilled them out by hand. Didn't do a very good job. It was okay, it wasn't brilliant. But I couldn't use my Dremel, for instance, because the Dremel RPM is far too high and melts plastic. This one the RPM is very low, so in theory it shouldn't melt the plastic. So I'm going to be building this up. Now, when I say building this up, this actually comes in kit form. So when you get the box like this, and when you open it up, which I'll show you in a second, you'll see it's an actual model kit. So I'll just take off the lid at the top, and there we go. So it's actually presented in just like any other model kit that you would see. The only difference is this has got mechanical moving parts. So we have the main body of the gun there, and we have some wheels, and then we have the mechanisms for the trigger, and then we have all the electric motor and all the terminal points. So I mean, it looks fairly simple. I can't see any problems with it. Just have a little sticker there if you want to put it on. I probably won't bother. So the instructions, just have a quick look at these. Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. It starts off with building the trigger, well, some of the contact points by the looks of it, and then going on to eventually filling it up, closing it up. So this will be interesting because I've never built something like this before. It looks easy enough. It's designed so that anyone can build it. Doesn't matter what your background is, whether you have a background in building or electronics or anything. It's a simple build. So let's jump into this and see how well I get on. So as you can see there, I've laid out all the terminal copper parts, and I'm just taking off the first part from the sprue now. And this is the terminal housing. And I'll just clean up any little boards or sprues. You can do this with a knife or by a file. I prefer a knife, but if you use a knife, make sure your blade's not 100% sharp, because one, you may cut your fingers, and two, you may take a chunk of plastic off that you don't want it to come off. The first part at the battery terminal is placing one end, and at the part where it bends down, there's a little recess hole for the copper area to go in. And then the bigger part, that just thing gets pushed into the housing, and it should click once you hear the little copper bit connecting with its housing, so it just snaps into place. There's another part of the terminal, this little square part here, and that goes in exactly the same way as the first one. Part of the copper goes underneath the housing, then clicks into place. I should point out this kit is designed so no cement is needed, so no super glue, no normal modelling cement, nothing. It should all go together without cement. And once both parts are in, I'm just making sure they're properly seated in their housing. Just by pressing it down, either with my tweezers or my fingers, just making sure that they won't move. So the next part is the actual motor, and the first part is fairly simple. There's a little pinion gear that just gets pushed on. This is very tight, so just be aware that it does fit, but it is very tight. Once it's on, if you press it down onto your bench and then push, then you'll get it into lock it into position. To fit the motor into the housing, on the back piece here, there's a little flat bit that goes underneath the housing frame. If you fit that bit in first, and then just push the motor down, and then it's in position. Next part of the build is to place in the shaft stopper, and this is what stops the chuck from turning when you're putting things in. First of all, there's a little spring that goes on to a lockable shaft or a shaft stopper, and then the plastic housing goes on top. And there's two little contact points. It just goes in there. It's a little bit. My hands are a bit big, so I'm using my tweezers just to push it in. Again, no cement required, as I was saying. Just press it in firmly, and then everything should look okay. Next, we have the drill's main lock off. There's the lock switch at the on the outside goes in first, or it doesn't necessarily have to go in first, but it's easier that way. I'm going to hold it with a little bit of tape just to make sure it doesn't slip in and trying to fit the next part. It just makes it a little bit easier to do. I actually found this bit quite tricky, to tell you the truth. Once it was in, the next part is the inner switch, and in there's a screw that goes in to connect it all, and it's an 8mm screw, and you don't really have to screw it in at this point. I'm just pushing it and using my screwdriver to push it in. Now it should be simple enough just to marry it up and then screwing it in until it's tight. However, it kept on slipping with me, and this took about 10-20 minutes for me to sort out. But eventually I managed to get it to line up and put the screw in. It's probably just me being ham-fisted putting it together, like, you know, but I found this part really difficult to do, and this was the only part that I found difficult. I'm not sure why it was, but it just would not go in for me. But as I say, it took about 20 minutes for me to sort out. But I got it in eventually, and just checked the switch to make sure it is working, and yeah, everything looks fine. Just took a little while, as I say, for me to get the thing fitted. And now moving on to the trigger mechanism, and there's three main parts to this, three of the main plastic parts here. So you've got the trigger, that will go in first, as you can see there. Try and get that lined up straight to the actual trigger guard. The next part, the bottom part, this is what will make the connection go on and off. That goes in the bottom. It just sits in there. There's no actually any guiding point at this point to hold it in. That will come later on. And then the big transfer bar will go in between. But there's a little bit of work to do on that before I place it on. In the middle section, there's a screw and a spring that has to go in, and that then gets connected to the actual main unit itself. So I'll build up that part first before placing it in, instead of trying to build it all up once it's there. So I'll just move the camera. So it all gets connected. There's a central connection point just where my pliers are there, and it all gets screwed down to it. So the first thing I have to do is place in the spring. So the spring goes in the middle. There's a little lip on the end of the spring that it hooks into. I don't know whether the camera will pick it up now. Just there's a little lip, and there's a tiny little hole there, and the central part then just goes over the hole, so it all lines up. Then after that, there's a little 3mm washer I'll just put on, and then the screw gets fitted in where the spring and recess hole is, the holder is for there. So it's all fairly straightforward, and then a brush goes on the underside. This is a metal brush, and that just gets popped in right up into the housing like that. Now I have to hold all these together so that I can place it within the housing unit of the controller. Before I do that, I've got to put a little bit of grease on the location points. That comes with a tube of little grease. If you haven't got any grease, some 3-in-1 oil will do as well. I'll then take the bar and line up the screw to the middle prong, and I'll just start this off so that the screw's connected and everything won't come out. And once that's done, then I'll put each bar in position with the location pins locked into position. So that's it, all there. I mean, the middle one will fall slightly until you get lock it in position. It's easy enough to do. once that is in position, I'll hold it down because it is spring loaded now, and I'll just tighten up the screw. And everything's in, it's all tightened down, and I'll just do a quick test to make sure everything is moving freely, which it is. Moving on to the main drive shaft, and I've already cut off a couple of cogs, as you can see. So first of all, just applying a little bit of the grease to the plastic bearing, and this is very, very simple to build up this part. All I'm doing is putting this bearing onto the shaft until it goes right down to the bottom. Now that'll move up and down until I lock everything into place, and then the first cog will then sit on the front of the shaft. So that just gets pushed in like that. Then I place on a C-clip or a C-washer, depends on your terminology, and that just gets pushed onto the shaft so it locks off the cog. Now these washers are tough little things, so you may need to use your pliers just to push that on. And then on the same shaft on the opposite side, where the cog is, we put on a normal washer, and then another plastic washer goes on top. There's an orange one. Now this will probably fall off if you put it on at this stage because nothing will be holding it. It is tight, so it shouldn't fall off, but it may be able to. It will only go in one way as well. Just push it on. If you do find it coming off, just try and be patient with it. It should lock in, but as I say, you may have a little bit of difficulty. But don't worry if it does come off, because when it goes into its housing, it will be okay. And it won't pop out or anything, it'll just sit where it's meant to be. So the second stage of the shaft is pretty much the same as the first stage, apart from the smaller cog goes on first. Well, it's more of a washer or a bearing than a cog. Then the larger cog goes on at the opposite end, and that'll just push on, making sure I've got a little bit of grease on it, and pushing it down, and then the actual thing all gets connected together. Again, this may pop off, don't worry about it, because the way it's designed to go into this housing, it will all sit there happily on its own. So putting it in, it is really simple. Each cog has its own little bay to sit in, and all you have to do is line up the cogs into their little bays. You can see the bearing, just moving slightly. Once it's in its bay, it will not move, the shaft will not fall apart or anything like that, and you can turn them at this point to make sure everything moves. The third shaft is straightforward. That just gets placed right into the cog. Try and get it as even as possible, and just wiping off an excess bit of grease there, and then that will just sit in its housing, and the teeth of that cog will then butt up against the other cog so that everything is moving. It's a good idea also to put some grease on the teeth of the cogs as well, so it'll get lubricated as it gets turned. Next is the thermal switch, and this is just a thin bit of copper with a hooked end on it, which gets placed into the house, and there's a little contact point for it just to hook around, and then that simply lays over the top of the actual switch bar. So I'll just bring that to the camera so you can see it properly, and I'll just move it a bit. There you go, there it is there. So as you can see, it didn't move all that well. That was because at the tail end of the copper switch, I had it tucked underneath a bit of plastic, and it was on the pin on position. So it was a simple case of just taking that off and repositioning it. And once I'd done that, just where my finger was there, everything moved freely. Next is the motor to go in. It just sits on its little housing. There's a little cradle that the motor sits in. All you have to do is make sure that the cog meet together, so when the motor turns, the obviously cogs will turn. As I say, just press it in and it should work absolutely fine. And before I close it up, I'm just sticking the batteries in to see whether everything is working. Yeah, I'm having to hold the batteries down because the little grey end plate that you see on the mat there, that's got to go in to stabilise everything. and that plate just lies on top, so that holds in the terminal switch and trigger mechanism all in place so that it can move freely from side to side. So it's time to close up, and there's only 4 screws that will hold this together. It's fairly self-explanatory. The screws fitted in fine. You know, just be careful you don't over tight them. Some people have a tendency to over tight these things. Try not to over tight them, because you can ruin the plastic as well as the thread. And all you have to do is to fit the batteries. The batteries only going one way, from the bottom to the top. That's worth pointing out. At first I thought, oh, the batteries don't fit, but they do. And so you can't see it there, but it is working. Once I put the shaft on to hold the drill bit, then you'll see it working. And the cover just snaps on like any old cover. So I'll just fit in the drill bits, give it a test, and that'll be the drill made up and done. Now this does run at a very low RPM, so don't expect you to drill through wood and things like that. It's only for plastic, and it shouldn't burn your plastic as you're drilling it. So there's the speed. That's the maximum speed it will do. It will not do any more than that, and that's absolutely fine for drilling windows and things like that into your model. Well, that's it for this build. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds? If you subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to date with all my future builds. Hit that like button. Don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.